Hello and welcome to the On Farm podcast. It's Anna here with you this week, and now because a lot of people take a break from the roller coaster of podcast listening over the summer holidays, we're actually going to repeat an episode that we broadcast a few weeks ago, which is some brilliant stuff recorded at the Royal Highland Show. So if you have been busy and haven't had a chance to listen, here is one of those episodes for you to enjoy now. Hello and welcome to On Farm. This is actually a first for us, this episode, and something that will be a little bit different to listen to. We have for you a live recording of On Farm, which was recorded in front of a busy audience in the Food for Thought Cookery Theatre at the 2024 Royal Highland Show. As you might know, we have been working with the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society of Scotland to gather together stories to celebrate RHASS's 240th year. We have many more stories coming up over the next few weeks, and I'll perhaps tell you a bit more about that at the end of this episode. But for today, we've brought together three people from across food and farming, all with really good stories to tell. So we have Jock Gibson from Macbeth Butchers and Edinvale Farm and Forest, Joe McNichol, who runs the wonderful Clifftop Drift Cafe in East Lothian, and Jackie McCreary, who is from Yester Farm Dairies, also works for SLE and is a RHASS director. We're doing something a bit different today. You can't see any pans or utensils. We're not cooking a thing. What we're actually doing instead is recording a podcast in front of you guys who are our live audience. We are recording the On Farm podcast. I'm Anna and I'm one of the regular presenters. The On Farm podcast was Scotland's first rural podcast, which was launched back in 2020. Since then, we have produced over 200 episodes, and we put a new episode out during school term time every Monday morning. Today is the first episode that we have ever recorded in front of so many people. Usually it's just producer Dave, who's over there in the jumper. Usually it's just he and I chatting to one person, maybe two people, or a small group. But the reason we're doing live today is because we have partnered with the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society of Scotland and the Royal Highland Show to work with them on their 240 Years of Stories campaign. And we're trying to do our bit by getting more stories told and getting those stories into what for us is an audio archive. Producer Dave and I have been wandering around the showground trying to gather 50 voices from all sorts of different people, young farmers, exhibitors, older farmers, members of the public, school kids, you name it. We're trying to get 50 voices for people to tell us what it is about the Highland Show that's important to them and why they're here. But this live session, as you can see, I've got three wonderful guests with me today, is to allow them to tell their stories and for us then to talk about why it's important that we try to connect the producer with the consumer. And all three of my guests have got their own take and their own direct experience of trying to do that. So it's all about championing rural people and their enterprise and their stories and speaking with consumers. So I am joined by the three J's, actually, we worked out outside, Jock, Joe and Jackie, who have all been jostling to work out who goes first to tell their story. And I think there was just a kind of female vote that Jock's going first. So I'm going to hand him the microphone and encourage him to tell his own personal story. That each of our guests will do the same thing, and then we'll have a discussion, and we'd love to get you involved to ask questions or interject or tell us if you agree or if you disagree with what they've said. You might have a shared experience, but also to tell us what it is about the Highland Show that you think is important and why we should be encouraging many more people to be here to engage with a little bit of rural life here in Edinburgh. So I'll hand Jock the microphone and let him go first, and you can just sit back and relax and listen, hopefully, and enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name's Jock Gibson, and I'm a farmer and butcher from a small village called Dallas up in Murray, otherwise known as the Sunshine Coast of Scotland. We are beef and sheep farmers, so we have a small farm up there with predominantly Highland and Shorthorn beef, some Herdwick sheep, and we have a butcher's shop in Forest called Macbeth's. The farm was bought by my father and grandparents back in the mid-70s, and Dad stole a couple of Highland cows from his parents who were mowing the lawn for them, and built up a pedigree Highland herd. What he discovered was that then and now a Highland beast is not worth very much on the commercial market. So for all the pedigree cattle he was selling, good pedigree bulls and heifers, there was stirks and other heifers that weren't going to make breeding grade, that didn't necessarily have the value that he thought they were worth. So he bought a butcher shop in the mid-80s, as you do, to try and add value to what he was doing. That started off as a high street butcher. It slowly developed into more retail, into food service, and then in the mid-90s, mail order. And that was before we had the internet and online shopping as we know it today. So my upbringing, in about 3 months before Christmas, was as a family, we'd all sit down in front of the fire whilst Mum hand-addressed envelopes, and we all stuffed the envelopes with various leaflets and flyers portraying the goodness of pure Highland beef. Things obviously have moved on from then. We now have a website, and in 2015 my wife and I moved up to the farm. I've been looking after the butcher's shop since 2007, and Fiona and myself and the kids moved up, and we now run both. So we have Highland and Shorthorn beef. We're Pasture for Life certified, which means all they eat is grass and grass-based substances, so silage, hay, that sort of thing. So no concentrate feed, because over the years we've learnt that our particular customers, that's what they're looking for. We're very proud that we can adapt our business to meet what our customer requirements are. We now have a growing online business, so we send beef throughout the country, whether it's Inverness or Cornwall. It doesn't make any odds. We package it up and it goes overnight courier, 24 hours, and it arrives at its destination, hopefully in one piece. As we've developed the farm, we're also developing an agri-tourism side of it, which involves farm tours. It involves a shop at the farm, including some baking that Fiona does, home bakes and sourdough bread. And we're looking at increasing that as well, so that we can have, at the moment it just runs out of an honesty shop, and we're looking at increasing that so that we've got vending machines that people can come and stop by. What else can I tell you? Is that probably enough to be getting on with for the moment?
Well, in a way, yes, but maybe tell us a little bit about what you do when you're not farming or involved with the butcher shop, because I think that all feeds into your life story.
So other parts of my life, I'm a director for Farmstrong Scotland, which is a wellbeing programme for farmers and crofters. That is, we all have wellbeing, and we are looking to help farmers and crofters have the conversations and build the tips and tools into their daily lives so that they can work with improved levels of well-being, which helps them make better decisions. It helps have better relationships and basically get more out of life and more out of farming and crofting. It's something you see a lot in elite sports people. You know, people that are really at the top of their game generally have good levels of well-being and work on that actively. I'm also a 2024 Nuffield Scholar, supported by RHASS. They're one of my sponsors, along with the Worshipful Company of Butchers. And I'm looking into meat eating quality from grass and forage-fed beef and lamb. That's particularly exciting for me. For my family, maybe less so, as I sort of disappear on my travels for 12 weeks at a time. So I was fortunate enough earlier this year to go to Brazil with all the other Nuffield Scholars from around the world for this year. And then I went on to places like Uruguay, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, looking at different production methods and what people are doing to produce good quality beef around the world, and trying to work out what we can learn from that, both as an individual business, but an important part of being a Nuffield Scholar is what you can impart to the rest of the industry. So it's very much you're going on a learning journey that hopefully you can help the industry by disseminating that information.
Spot on. Thanks, Jock. And we'll come back, I'm sure we'll come back to a lot of what you've said when we have a bit of a discussion later on. And just another reminder, hopefully some of our audience members are thinking of questions to ask or comments to make. But Jo, please do tell us your story next, if that's okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Jo McNichol, and together with my husband Stuart we farm a 430 acre arable farm just outside North Berwick called Castleton Farm. Back in 2018, in fact 6 years ago today, we opened our doors to a diversification. My husband came up with this crazy idea, well I thought it was crazy at the time, of converting shipping containers and popping them on the edge of one of our cliffs. I told him to lie down in a darkened room. However, to date, we now welcome over 120,000 people through our door a year. So back in 2018, because we had explored the idea of diversification quite a bit, all the ideas we came up with prior to Drift were far too big. And so we decided to scale it right back and offer a simple coffee and cake offering. Whilst I have had experience in the hospitality sector in my early 20s and late teens, I had never owned or run my own hospitality business. So I'm given that Stuart had only ever been used to working on a tractor or a combine. He definitely didn't have any experience. So it was really important for us to start small and then begin to scale up. So after about 6 months and baking lots of cakes and not having any room to put these cakes and almost selling them out the door warm, we expanded our 5 shipping containers to 6, and we started to offer what has become quite iconic in the Drift role. One of our main things that we wanted to really get across was we wanted to work with Scottish producers and working seasonally if we could. So I found this recipe for this, which I've taken it on and just called it the Drift roll, but essentially a locally baked roll, herb aioli, spinach, bacon and a fried egg. And you'd think, really, do those flavour combinations work? So I gave it to Stuart and he said, absolutely, we put this on our menu. So we started to sell that along with some bacon rolls, fresh soup, freshly made soup, and scones. And at the time we were also doing a cheese scone light lunch, as we dipped our toe into that lunchtime offering, which so many people wanted other than the coffee and cake. And it consisted of Galloway Lodge, poacher's pickle, mull of Kintyre cheddar at the time, and then our cheese scone. And then in 2019, we actually became monitor farmers for the Agritourism Monitor Farm programme. And this whole programme for us, although it ran right into COVID, really took our business from being 7 or 8 staff to what it is today, which is 32 staff and our 120,000 visitors a year. So it allowed us to speak with lots of other businesses, it allowed us to really gain in confidence. And after a meeting during COVID online with another agritourism farmer, I said, right, that's it, Stuart, we're expanding again. And he said, really? And I said, absolutely. Our customers, I think, when we get out of COVID, they're going to want more. So we started by converting a Sinclair and Rice horse trailer, and we positioned that outside Drift. And that's how we opened after COVID, just serving takeaway, still doing the bacon rolls. We'd started to do sausage rolls. We started with the coffee and cake. But very soon I said, no, we need to add a bigger kitchen. So we added a bigger kitchen. And I dived into the world of employing chefs. Fickle people, but you know what? I'm
not sure you should be saying that in this particular environment, Jo.
I know, but they can be.
All very lovely, anyway, I'm sure.
I've got a brilliant team of chefs now, absolutely brilliant team. No, I wholeheartedly do have a brilliant team of chefs. But it's taken 3 years to really establish a menu that suited us at Drift. I was really keen on that seasonal Scottish produce, changing the menu every 3 months. But what was the right style? And I think we've hit upon it now in that we're serving street food style food, still diving around the world in terms of different ideas, drawing on different flavour combinations, but whilst using Scottish produce. We invested in a smoker and we're now smoking our own venison. Our venison pastrami is one of our favourite dishes currently on this season's menu. And it's really what the customer wants. Today also, it's today of everything. We're launching a new outside cooking trailer, so I can offer takeaway and eating outside to all outside customers by getting their hot food from this trailer and then keeping our inside to a larger menu. So in 6 years, we've done a heck of a lot, and we've really expanded the business. But I love most is talking to the consumer. I love speaking about what we're doing. I love speaking about the produce we're using, where we get it from. We've used some of Jock's beef before and lamb, I believe, at one point. And having that connection with the producer to be able to pass that on is absolutely amazing. And it really enlightens them and makes them think about what they're eating on their plate.
I live quite close by, so I've had the cake and some of the food, and I can vouch for the fact that it's absolutely delicious. So, yeah, thank you, Joe. If
Anna,
you have missed anything, we can come back to it in the discussion.
Anna, we should just acknowledge that it's Drift's 6th birthday today.
Yes, indeed.
So, happy birthday.
Yeah, I hope you've made
Drift.
a cake.
She's made hundreds.
Thank you, Joe, and yeah, happy birthday. So, Jackie, over to you.
Hi folks, my name is Jackie McCreary. So first and foremost, my husband and I are dairy farmers based in East Lothian, which is just about half an hour south of Edinburgh, where we are today. We have a dairy herd on site, and we also process all of our own milk. So rather than the usual situation is for milk to be taken away by tanker to a large processor and then distributed back around the country, my husband, when he came back home after university, decided that seemed a bit of a madness for him to go to our local shop and to buy milk that had travelled halfway around the country. So we started to process and pasteurize our own milk. And we started off just selling milk and cream to our local hotels and restaurants. And my husband, some of Anna has met him, and some of you have. He's not a salesman by nature; he's a farmer. But actually, that worked quite well because our local hoteliers and restaurateurs actually quite liked the fact that they were buying produce from the farmer up the road. So we've kind of progressed through the years, and we have moved on to making some yogurt and soft cheeses and mozzarella. It's called Fiora di Latte mozzarella, which is really the mozzarella you get on your pizzas, so the slightly harder mozzarella. And we sell now all around the country. A lot of our produce goes down south to restaurants and hotels and into the food service sector. We also sell our products locally in Scotland, in supermarkets here and farm shops. So we've sort of grown organically over the years, and hopefully still room to grow. So that's our sort of professional side of things. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not exactly local, although I feel like I am now. I've been here for 24 years, but originally from Northern Ireland, as is my husband and his family. They bought their farm in East Lothian in the early 90s, as a lot of Irish farmers did, and I'm very glad he chose the spot he chose, because it's a beautiful place to live, and that's where we bring up our kids. We have 2 teenagers. I grew up on a farm in Northern Ireland, so we have that sort of common background. And I think, I'm not sure about others here, but I think it helps to marry a farmer if you kind of have an understanding of the lifestyle, because it's not for everyone. I always swore I would never marry a farmer, but here we are. And outside of our home life and family and the dairy, I am by trade a solicitor, so I work as an in-house legal advisor for an organisation called Scottish Land and Estates. So we represent the interests of landowners and rural businesses in Scotland. As well as that, one of my other hats is I'm a director of the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society of Scotland, or RHASS as it's known. And so RHASS is the organisation that puts on the Highland Show every year. That's our showcase event. We are a rural charity, so we provide funding for things like the Nuffield Scholarship. We support local shows in Scotland because at the end of the day, all the experience and skill from those shows grows to kind of the pinnacle that is the Highland Show.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jackie. Hopefully that was a really interesting insight into the lives and businesses and families and passions of our guests. You know, we're sitting here. This is a cookery theatre. Everybody else who's here for the 4 days of the Highland Show is cooking something. And that is a perfect showcase for produce to demonstrate to the people watching perhaps where to buy it from, perhaps how to cook it, perhaps how to tell if it's the best quality. And that produce could range from meat to vegetables to soft fruits to dairy to you name it. But why do you think that things like this theatre, and in fact the Highland Show as a broader showcase, are so important when it comes to connecting producers to consumers? Jackie, go on.
One of the things I didn't mention was I'm involved with, and it's part of the Highland Society, is a charity called the Royal Highland Educational Trust. Part of its remit is to connect children with where their food comes from. It's a massively important part of what we do. When we have school visits to the farm, one of the first questions I ask the children is, what do all farmers do? And generally they'll say drive tractors, or they'll wear wellies, or things like that. But actually, all farmers make food. And if it wasn't for farmers, they wouldn't have food. And generally the kids think food comes from a supermarket, or it's something that arrives in their cupboard, and they don't really understand where it comes from. So actually it's really important for the consumer to realise that their food originates on a farm, with all its smells and noises and things that they're not familiar with. And it's really important, I think, that kids get out onto farms and see the people. Because if you come onto our farm, and it's a similar story in farms across the country, lots of the people who work on farms live on the farm.
Yeah.
It's a community, and it's not just those jobs that are created because of the farm. It's all the downstream jobs that in a country place like ours, it's actually a really important part of the economy for the country. Mm-hmm. It's a huge network that unless you start by going to the farm and seeing what happens there, you don't understand all the other bits and pieces. Because the kids, for example, the last farm visit we had, there was someone out from our local mechanical engineer company fixing a tractor. Well, there's a job that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the farmers.
And I suppose that whilst that it's not a farm here, you have many of the elements of a farm, and if you're here on a school visit or with your family and you get the opportunity to wander around, you get to see the livestock, you get to see the cooking, as we've talked about, you get to see all the machinery and all of the elements. So it's a great day out, but also it's the next best thing to actually being on a real farm.
Also seeing the people. It's the people,
yes,
and how important it is to them, and how passionate they are about it, and how proud they are of it, and the work that goes into that. So it's not just a pint of milk on a shelf or a steak in a fridge. There's a story behind that. There are people behind that whose lives and livelihoods depend on it.
Yeah. Which is exactly what we're all about today, the people behind it and telling those stories. Yeah, Joe, what you add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say it's not actually just the children, the adults too. The number of people that I've interacted with, even at Drift, who haven't understood that lamb isn't in season in the spring. That's when they're born. But it's a really important conversation to have, and I think that this show really offers people that, as Anna says, that chance to go and speak with the producers. The food hall is a great place to be able to go and speak to producers and hear about the passion, as you say, that they put into their products. It's actually how we came into contact with a couple of our own suppliers at Drift. But to be able to hear their story allows us to pass that on, and to be able to do that it just freshens up people's minds. I spoke to a customer a few weeks ago who complained about being late for a booking because they got stuck behind a tractor. So when I explained that actually these tractors were out on the road and it had been a very difficult time for farming because of the weather, because we were experiencing a lot of rain, and actually what they were probably about to go and do, and I explained about our own and wheat growing, and the fact that we'd lost a lot of wheat, and the fact that meant we might not have as many gin bottles as potentially, and he was like, do you know what, I'm going to look at tractors in a totally different light. But it was a really, really important conversation to have, and again, this show offers so many thousands of people that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jock?
I agree completely with what's already been said. It's about conversations and about how we as producers, so we don't this year, but traditionally we've had a stand in the food hall. It gave us a brilliant opportunity to speak to a lot of people in quite a short space of time. And you get to have those conversations over a sample of a product and explain the story behind it. Even if somebody goes away not having bought something, they've gone away with a greater appreciation of what you're trying to do. You don't get those opportunities very often, and certainly not to a huge amount of people. A lot of what we face in the industry, we talk about this disconnect between consumers and farmers. Consumers don't understand farmers. I quite often think farmers don't understand consumers, but that's maybe a slightly different thing. So the likes of the Highland Show and regional shows, it enables those conversations so that farmers can understand consumers, consumers can understand farmers, and we can all work together to having a greater understanding of what and why we're doing it.
That's a really interesting one, actually, because I think sometimes the farming industry is guilty of complaining that consumers don't hear their story or listen to their messages. But we do have to remember that sometimes you've got to flip it the other way. And yes, the three of you interact with consumers through the types of businesses that you run, but perhaps those farmers who run a business that doesn't have that absolute connection to consumers just need to take a step back and think, well, I need to put myself in their shoes. What do they want and why do they want it, and how can I work towards providing that and understanding their motivations?
And it's interesting as well, because I've been very fortunate to do a lot of travelling recently, and there is a very clear mindset difference between those that are producing and selling to a consumer, to a customer, and those that are selling into a general marketplace or a major retailer. They don't have that same connection, and it's very difficult to build up, what a consumer is looking for or what the farmer is trying to do for the consumer if there is those too many steps in the chain, if you like. So it's how we again try and shorten those steps to have those really good, powerful conversations.
Mm-hmm. What is it that made you get to where you are? What is the passion that drives you to keep doing, to get you to where you are now, but also that drives you to keep getting up in the morning and keep doing what you're doing? Because I know that none of the businesses that you run are easy, and they're certainly all very time consuming, but something is driving you to keep going, and I'd love to know what that is.
For me, it's that interaction with the consumer. I'm welcoming quite a few of them through the door every day. I love to be able to pass on knowledge. I talk about our farm all the time. I talk about what we're doing all the time. And one of our main goals over the next couple of years is to get more of our own farm produce into Drift so that people can really see where it's coming from firsthand. A lot of people, when they come to Drift, don't understand that they're coming to a working farm. So just simply to be able to pass that on is brilliant in itself. And then it opens up the gates and the doors for further conversation, which they become really engaged with. And for many of them, it's a reason to come back. It's not just about coming back for the food, but it's about coming back to learn more. And we're developing our story and our experiences more and more and more. So eventually, like Jock, looking to open up for farm tours and being able to see our newly planted orchard of fruit trees. And then potentially, aspirations are for a juicing plant and cidery, so that we can engage with the customer firsthand. They can see the juice being made, the cider being made, they can taste it, and I think it just brings it to life a little bit more. And I think that's what drives me, is bringing it to life for the consumer.
In our case at Yester Farm Dairies, I think our initial driver has changed what drives us now. Initially, our motivation was financial stability, because the dairy industry has historically been very volatile. So either prices are high or they drop very low, and you're kind of in a cycle and you're beholden to whoever happens to be buying your milk. So we wanted to have a bit of control over our own destiny, I guess, and bad or good, it was up to us to make it that way.
Yeah.
And we didn't necessarily want to be beholden to the vagaries of the dairy industry. So that was initially our driver. I think we went into it quite naively. We had very steep learning curves.
A bit like me, the idea that I should make a podcast.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And also, my husband's philosophy is say yes and work out how to do it later. So that was me with my lawyer brain. I'm wildly in the background trying to work out how to do things and getting all the detail, well, he's agreeing to do X, Y, and Z and take on new customers and develop new products. But anyway, here we are. So I think that kind of financial stability for ourselves and our family was what started us. We have about 20 employees at the moment. Some of them live on the farm. And so we are kind of responsible for them and for their families, and in turn, I feel that as a responsibility on our shoulders now to make that, to have that to continue and to keep them going. And I think also there's a drive to just get better at what you do, because we started from such a low level of knowledge, I have to say. There was a lot of scope to grow and to improve, and I think that desire to get better and to do things better and to improve what we do and expand what we do is what keeps us going.
Yeah. Jock, last but not least.
So yeah, my drivers have definitely changed. Before I came back to the butchery, I was an engineer, and I was a crap one. And so I needed a new career, and the driver was not to have to go back to the old one. But it has changed. There is a huge privilege and satisfaction in taking a product through, crudely, from conception to consumption. We are breeding our cattle, we have calves on the ground, we are taking them through the process over a couple of years and taking them through to our butcher's shop. We're dry aging them, we're taking care of the beef there. And there is a massive amount of satisfaction, and it is a genuine privilege to be able to do that, because not many people do. And not many people get to tell the story of how that all happens. And so that is now the driver, is that we want to carry on being able to do what we do because we enjoy it. We think we are doing a good job. And most of our customers tell us that we are, which is nice. But we want to be able to do that and make it more available to more people. We don't want to be massively huge and forget where we've come from or forget our principles, but we do want to make the most of what we've got and what we can do.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm told that we've got under 10 minutes left now, so I would love for somebody to put their hand up so that Dave can make himself useful for a change, and I'll get you to ask questions. So yeah, down there, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Lucy Laidlaw. Jock, you talked about Farm Strong and well-being. Actually, you've all just talked about how incredibly busy you are and how you've built these businesses. So I was interested to know what you guys do for your own well-being to make sure that you're performing professionally, but also for your families and for your life.
Good question.
Before we answer that, do we want anybody else with questions that we can just sort of line up? Is there one more over here?
Do you feel you have an advantage in terms of producing a nature-positive product by having processing on farm over some of the larger supply chains that we see? And what could larger supply chains maybe learn from you? Oh, sorry. Justin Ord, South of Scotland Enterprise.
I'll go for the easy one first, the well-being one. So, board member of Farm Strong. One of the key tenets to Farm Strong is the 5 ways of well-being. And I can only ever remember 4 of them, but here goes. Keeping active, taking notice, giving, connecting. I always draw a blank with the 4th.
Well, you did warn us,
I
so
normally
it's okay.
forget give. But anyway, so giving for me is quite a big one. It is scientifically proven that if you give up your time to help other people, you get a benefit out of that. It makes you feel better. You feel like you're doing good things. So I give up my time for Farm Strong. There's other ways of doing it. It might be to help out at your local school. It might be local rugby club, whatever it might be. You know, connecting obviously is important. It's what we're all doing here now. I've wrecked my knee, so keeping active's a bit more tricky. But it's those sort of things that try and do and form those habits. Take 60 days to form a habit, really tedious. So you have to keep on working at it to get it going. In terms of the processing, so our butcher's site is off farm. It's an old traditional butcher's shop, and we have pretty much control of the whole process apart from abattoir. what can others learn from it? I guess what we're able to do is react really quickly to market situations. COVID being the prime one. Our business overnight changed from being predominantly food service to mail order. It's not anything different from what we were doing anyway. It's just the volumes changed. Horse meat scandal would be another crisis, but also change in consumer trends. We can respond really quite quickly. So for the larger processors, larger producers, it's how that changes. And it's really hard on farm because you're making decisions now that you might not see the ramifications of for 5 years. Whole governments change in that time, recently more than twice. So it's that nimbleness, that fleet of foot that as you get bigger is more difficult, but is really important to try and maintain.
I might answer the trickier one first, jumping on the back of Jock. I think at Drift we have taken a very active decision to support local and Scottish producers, and one of the reasons we do that is because the flavour profiles are so much better, more intense. You get more out of it. The customers appreciate it more. Larger producers, you're losing a little bit of that. That's why we deliberately go for slightly smaller scale producers, because you still get that intensity and flavour. As a farm who is looking to produce themselves our own juicing and cider, we're not looking to go big, and we're not looking to go big deliberately, and it's so that we can really hone down on that product, and as Jock says, become a bit more reactive to the consumer demands and the consumer wants and needs. In terms of health and well-being, one of the things we are about to launch in the next month or so is a sauna, which is that, my husband comes up with wacky ideas sometimes, but somehow they always come good in the end. And so we've linked with Farmstrong Scotland, and once a month we at the moment are putting our sauna next to Drift, and we're inviting farmers and non-farmers to come along and experience a sauna session in order to just talk and relax. And I was explaining to Jock just before we came, I spoke to a farmer a month ago who was quite down, and I was able to, through a little bit of a joke, cheer him up. But he went away that evening saying how brilliant the session had been, how he felt far more relaxed, and he was actually going away to focus way more on himself and not get bogged down in the day-to-day, but actually take time for himself throughout a week in order to be able to keep his mental health well. And I would wholeheartedly agree with that, because I think when you're running your own business, you can become totally bogged down in what you're doing day to day. I mean, personally, I take myself off into North Berwick and go for a bit of a shop.
I thought you were going to say a swim there, considering you live right on an amazing beach. No. But no.
But the point for me is I'm getting off farm, I'm going somewhere different, and I'm just allowing my head space to move somewhere else. And I think it's just important to find those things. Or it's taking the dog for a walk and enjoying enjoying the countryside around us, because we've got some stunning beaches and what have you around us. And so those kind of things, I might get in the sauna eventually, but watch this space. Taking notice. There you are. I'll take notice of that and maybe join in.
Yeah, so I think the second question for me is the easier one. Having on-farm processing is a massive benefit, I think, not just for us, but there are loads of examples of why we think it's a good thing. I'm actually quite passionate about this, about local, regional processing, because we see it in times of crisis, like the Beast from the East. Supermarket shelves were empty of milk, and yet the local shopkeepers with the little independent shops were well stocked with Yester milk. So that, for a start, I think short supply chains are really important. And it's not to say there's not a place for large processors, there absolutely is, but I think not to the expense of squeezing out the smaller ones, because we have a really important place. And I think one of the examples of things that we do is to trying to find markets that are niche, that only small on-farm processors can do. So one of the things we're doing is supplying the kosher market in Manchester and London. For that market, we have a rabbi comes to the farm every other week and stays with us for the weekend, and which is really interesting. For that market to be able to source the milk from farm to process to package is almost impossible because large processors are drawing in milk from a number of farms. So to be able to track the milk from the cow to the cheese vat into the pot is almost impossible. So those kind of niche markets can only happen on small on-farm processors, and it's much more cost-effective for them. It's great for us because there's extra work involved with that, so we can add a margin that we might not otherwise get. So it's a win-win for everyone. So I think, yes, large processors, there's a place for them, absolutely, but we must always preserve and protect and support our local small processors. I would say that, obviously, but I really firmly believe it.
Well-being, Jackie. What do you do for your well-being?
For my well-being, I get off the farm as well, but I get off the farm to my other job. so I go and be a lawyer for relaxation. I think, but on a serious note, I think that is true, to get away, to get space outside of the farm, because you can get all consumed with what you're doing, and I feel there's such a responsibility with what you're doing, to get away and have fun, spend time with your friends, socialise, and sport. I think I'm not a gym buddy, but I think to exercise and to get out into the fresh air, walk the dog, and just take time off the farm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Jo, that one of the chefs you referred to earlier is probably going to come and kick us off in a minute, because they need to get ready for their slot at 3:00. So we might just wrap up there, unless there are any more burning questions from the audience. No, everybody's quite shy. But thank you to all three of you for telling us your stories. As I said at the beginning, this is part of the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society's 240 years of stories. So we've got three really lovely ones there to add to the pot. And I just wanted to say to finish off that when Dave and I were roaming around earlier on, we met with two young lads from an urban high school, and they started off by telling us that this was such a great event because it got them out of lessons. But by the end, one of them had said, actually, he said, I have got a real renewed or new appreciation for farmers and food producers and the people who make this happen, because I didn't realise until today what they do and how hard they work. So I think that kind of sums it up, and that's really the purpose of the Highland Show and the Highland Society and RHET, to work together to give more people an appreciation for what goes on in the countryside and what grows in the countryside. So thank you to all three of you for telling your stories. And hopefully we'll be back next year to do it all over again.
Thank you.
Well done. Huge thanks to Jackie, Jock and Jo, all the J's, for that episode. And links to all of their businesses will be in the show notes for this episode. Bye for now from Anna, Dave and all of the team at Scene and Heard and the On Farm podcast.